what is the main purpose of a warm-up, whatever we've read and understood so far. Okay. When we are talking about the warm-up phase, one is your general warm-up and one is your specific warm-up. When we mind about the general warm-up, the purpose of the general warm-up is what? To basically increase the blood flow. Okay. To basically psych up the nervous system, to get ourselves ready for the workout. Okay. When we go to theory, it's going to take a very long time, but basically it's to basically mentally and physically prepare you for the upcoming task or the upcoming challenge. That's what we mean by the general warm-up. When we talk about the specific warm-up always relates to the specific part that you're going to be training. Okay? The specific muscle groups that you're going to be training. That is what we mean by the specific warm-up. Okay? So when we talk about general warm-up, what are the different modalities of general warm-up? So basically we have your everything that we talk about cardio, so anything that you do on your cardio day can be basically related to the general warm-up. So let's say for example, walking on the treadmill, doing properly, using your cross trainer for 5 minutes, doing some cycling activities, spinning work, or basically even using the staircase climber. So some of the gyms have a stair climber. All these activities become a part of your general warm-up, where we are basically trying to improve the blood flow to the working muscles, and at the same time you're also trying to psych up the nervous system. Okay, so these are your general activities, general warm-up. Okay, now the general warm-ups can be basically divided into 2 to 3 categories. Okay, sorry, I'm sweating a lot because it's very hot.
Switch on the fan, you're sweating a lot.
No, that's okay. Actually, it gives a good glow to the skin, so I'm happy. Okay, yeah. So I was saying there are 2 to 3 different categories that we can talk about in general warm-up. What are these categories? You can basically segregate into weight bearing and impact bearing. Okay. Some of you who have attended my lectures have used these words before. Okay. So weight bearing is basically any kind of cardio activity which could be done standing, where your joints are bearing the weight. Okay. Impact is basically anywhere where you're trying to put an impact. So you're running. Okay. So when you are doing a general warm-up for yourself or for the client, you can basically understand your and the client's requirement and accordingly select which cardio warm-up is better for them. Okay. Generally, we want to avoid too much of impact because it's a general warm-up, right? Just to prepare your nervous system, to prepare your cardiovascular system. So anything like a brisk walk for 5 minutes would work good. Cycling becomes non-weight bearing, non-impact. Okay, because you are doing it seated, plus you're not creating impact, hitting the ground. So it becomes a non-weight bearing, non-impact. On the other hand, cross trainer. Okay, everybody knows cross trainer, elliptical. Okay, now what happens is that this kind of an activity is a weight bearing activity because you're standing and doing it, but there is no impact. Still, basically, a little level up, then one level up than cycling, but cycling would still be better for most people because of the non-impact. In cross trainer, there is no impact, but there is still weight bearing, so a little more challenging. And if you go into running, if you go into jogging, sprinting, these are all high impact and weight bearing activities. So depending on the profile of the client, you should ideally start with whether it's cardio or whether it's warm-up. Always start with non-weight bearing, non-impact. Then go to weight bearing but no impact. And then later on you can go to impact and weight bearing, both are okay as they progress themselves in their journey. Swimming again becomes a very fantastic example, but that becomes more of a cardio based activity. You're not going to basically use it for 5 minutes for a general warm-up. But again, swimming becomes better because of no impact and no weight bearing. So this is your initial phase. First 5-6 minutes you spend on your general warm-up. After that, what happens is that we get into something like myofascial rolling. Myofascial rolling basically can be done with a foam roller, can be done with a PVC roller, can be done with a tennis ball. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate some of the movements that you can do on a myofascial. You can use for myofascial rolling because there has been a lot of research on foam rolling and it has shown to basically help calm down the nervous system a bit. So if someone is having a lot of tight muscles in specific areas, you can use foam rolling. That doesn't mean that everybody has to do it. If my client doesn't have that particular problem, I'm not going to use it. But if I'm going to be let's say working on a particular, let's say today I'm going to do quads. Okay, today I'm going to be workout, I'm specifically focusing on quad work. Then if my client's quadriceps are tight, I will start the session with myofascial rolling by using a foam roller. Okay, so I'm going to take the roller now, show you all certain drills, okay, that can be done. I'm going to demonstrate about full body foam rolling. Okay, one of the most important parts. Upper back area, upper back, mid back, glutes, hamstrings, calf, quadriceps, latissimus, because lat tightness is again one of the most important problems to be dealt with. Because people who have a major difficulty in the front rack position, it's because of the tight triceps and the tight lats. So that can affect your athletic goals. Okay? So I'm going to jump right into the myofascial rolling, and then we'll basically discuss the other parts. So if I am trying to do rolling for my calf, this is what people do generally. Okay. This should not be done. The purpose of myofascial rolling is what? You're trying to basically focus on the tight areas where you have certain issues. So generally, if this is my calf area, I'm going to divide my calf into 3 parts and then start focusing on every part for 30 seconds. So divide into 3 parts. So this is 1/3, 2/3 and the third part. So let's take the 1/3 and then just focus here. 4, 5, 6, 7. So here I'm focusing for my gastrocnemius. Okay. Now if I want to go to the soleus, slightly lower, and this is how I'll be doing it. Now this is very good technique for beginners, because when you're doing the myofascial rolling, it also puts a lot of stress on your hands and shoulders to take the body weight. Okay. People find it difficult. If I am used to it, then this is how I'll be doing it, both the legs at the same time. So I can spend less time here and get it done faster. But now this is okay for me because I'm used to it. For someone not used to it, one leg at a time works the best. If you want more pressure, say for example you're like a advanced level person who's been foam rolling for a long time, then what you can do is that you can take your right leg, put it on the left, and then with the additional body weight we can do the rolling. Okay, so this is for your calf. Same technique can be used for hamstrings. So single leg. Okay. Again, the logic remains the same. Take the entire hamstring, divide into 3 parts. Focus on the small areas where you feel the maximum tightness. For me, example, I generally feel a lot of tightness in my hamstrings in the lower area, not in the upper area. That is my problem. So I focus more on the lower portion near the knee. So this is where I would focus more on. Again, single leg. If I want to save time, I can do both legs at the same time. The idea is that my butt is in the air now. So I'm putting my challenge of my body weight on the roller. Because what I'm trying to do is basically trying to cause compression. Okay. So this is basically nothing else but a compression technique. It's like, say for example, someone comes home tired after the hard office day. We tell our partner or we tell our brother, sister or mom to press our shoulders, right? Because it makes us feel better when we press our shoulders. Or we tell our kid to stand on our back. When he stands on the back, there is compression, you feel better. The muscle relaxes because of the tension that is created. Same technique you're using with a foam roller. You're causing a compression by putting your body weight on a particular roller. So you're causing compression. Same thing, if I want to create more challenge, I'll use my other leg, put it on the left leg, add weight and then do it. So, this is for hamstrings. Now if I want to do glutes, so I will sit here. Okay, if I want to put more weight on it, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my left leg, put it on my right, slightly tilt and try to find the spot where I feel the maximum tightness. Okay, so if you all can see, left leg goes on the right, hand is nicely supported here, and I'm going to slowly, gently roll the area where you feel the tightness maximum. Okay. It feels good, so I continue doing this more. Okay, so that is for your glutes. Other side, again, left leg goes straight, right leg comes on the top. I use my right hand and lean slightly towards the other side. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So probably spend about 30 seconds. So we are done with 3 parts: calf, hamstring, glutes. Now coming to adductor. So right now I place the roller this way, right? Now I'm going to place it vertically. Then what I do is lie down on the floor, get my leg into a 90-degree angle. So my quadricep comes up. I'm forming a 90-degree angle. Okay? And then I'm going to use my hand and gently press my body weight. Okay. There is no such rocket science here, but basically you need to find a comfort. You need to find a spot where you're feeling tight and then try and find a way to put more pressure over there so that you're causing compression. This. If I don't feel enough, then I'll pull my leg up, use my right hand, pull my thigh up and then roll it. A lot of times because of sitting jobs, the groin muscles get very tight. So this is very helpful to you foam roll the groin muscle. This, then I go on the other side, pull my thigh up and other leg is relaxing and then I push my body weight on it. I'm going to use my left hand, lift myself up in the air a little bit and push the pressure. Okay. Then comes your upper back. Okay. For upper back, take your arms, cross on your body, chest, and then just try to concentrate on the area where you feel maximum tightness. So if you see, the body weight is supported on the foot, butt is not relaxing here, butt is raised up, and then you're pushing your body weight ahead slightly. You can change your head position depending on how you feel better. You can do this. If you have overhead issues, then let the hands go behind. If people have overhead mobility issues. Okay, this is done. Find a good spot. Place the foam roller underneath the armpits. Hand should be straight. This is straight. Bring my right leg ahead so that I'm comfortable and I can push more weight onto it. Okay, and then what I can do is that I can even use my hands to roll forward and backward. I don't know how many of you can understand, but the movement is very little, but it's happening. I can also use my foot to create motion. So it's very small range of motion, but this works very beautiful. If it's hurting a lot, but the client has tight lats, but it's hurting a lot to do it, then just hold that position. Don't move, just hold it. If you can tolerate the pain, then try to move a little bit, otherwise just hold the position. So this is excellent for lats. Now this is after you've done your general warm-up. Now this is the first part, the myofascial rolling. I'm again repeating, not necessary for everyone. Depends what kind of tightness, what kind of problem the client is facing. I have an issue with my I have severe issue in my lats. The tightness issue, it's always been there. So for me, it becomes very important. There's a client who I trained, Sonali. She's not here today. She was supposed to be here. She generally doesn't have this particular problem. So I never give foam rolling for her. If she skips it, it's okay. If she wants to do it to feel better, I would say, okay, do it. But if she doesn't do it, it's okay. Because it's not going to hamper the performance in any way. Because her muscles are not as tight as mine. It becomes important to release it. Because if I don't release it, it can hamper my performance. It can hamper my technique. It can hamper my movement during the exercise. But for someone who doesn't have tightness, I'll be like, okay, let's avoid it. Doesn't matter. Okay. Motor verb activation is trying to divert more blood flow to that particular area. Okay. So again, it's more like a specific warm up. Okay. You've already now warmed up enough. So I did my 5 minutes of walking, which means I came walking from home. So that was like as good as my general warm up. Okay. So 5 minutes I've done that. I've done 5-6 minutes of my foam rolling. Now, next I'm going to move to is activation. Now, activation will be very specific to what you're actually trying to do. Okay, which muscle are you trying to work? So let's say, for example, today we are going to do the chest movements, the push movements. Okay, so what will my activation be like? I'm just going to show you. So if everyone can see what I'm doing, okay. Now what I'm going to do basically is, when I'm sitting, I'm actually trying to activate by how? By basically causing a intentional contraction in the muscle. Okay. I hope the voice is clear. Okay, now close. Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So there are some general activations that you're supposed to do. Okay. Because now you're dealing with a very complex portion in the exercise. Your shoulder joint, your glenohumeral joint, your clavicular joint. Okay. We need to improve stabilization in these particular areas. Something as simple as, okay, what you're supposed to do? First, trying and causing some retraction in the shoulder blades. Okay. What is the concept basically? So what we do is basically, if I'm going to sit the other way, so you all can see what I'm doing. Okay. So retraction in my shoulder blades. Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is that just try to push my shoulder blades behind, get them close to each other, and then hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, relax. So now exactly what I'm doing is basically, my scapular bone behind is basically responsible for a couple of movements. Elevation, depression, which means up and down. So which is up and down. Then again, protraction and retraction. That can be understood when I'm sitting sideways. Okay. So what I am going to do is basically trying to use my arm to turn the face inward of the arm. So I'm doing protraction and I'm doing retraction. Again, protraction and retraction. One last time. Again, palms are open right now. So I will protract it, turn inward. If you see, I'm protracting now. Now I will retract. So protraction, retraction, protraction, retraction. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to activate my spinal muscles. So people sometimes ask about rhomboids, people ask about the trapezius. So I'm basically causing a contraction, holding it, isometric contraction in the muscle which are actually going to stabilize my spine. Okay. Activation becomes very, very important. Then what is the other activation we can do for upper body? It's basically elevation and depression. So hands are straight. I elevate. 1, 2, 3. Again, depress. 1, 2, 3. If you see, there is no movement at the elbow joint. Elbow is straight. I'm lifting my shoulder up and down. So, elevation and depression. 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3. So if you see, same movement. First protraction, retraction, elevation, depression. One of the other good things that you can actually do is basically something as simple as this. Basically when we are doing the push-up for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. What am I doing? I'm trying to focus on the pec muscle shortening. Okay. So that basically I'm causing activation there. I'm activating that muscle so that it can be better prepared for the upcoming workout. One of the other ways we can similarly do in this is, if people are comfortable, single hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So 5 to 6 seconds, 10 seconds maximum. The other last activation that you can do.
So basically, again, this particular activation drill, excellent if you want to
Cause the muscle to contract. But exactly what am I doing? It's basically because I understand that the origin of muscle is here. The insertion is somewhere here. So what I'm trying to do, like I've said in my previous other lectures also, in an exercise, what you're trying to do, you're trying to bring the insertion close to the origin. That is exactly how the muscle contracts. Origin is always the stable point. It's a lot more stable. Insertion is always the moving point in the muscle, origin and insertion. So the origin, stable point, insertion, moving point. When I'm doing the activation, I'm trying to basically bring the insertion close to the origin. Okay? So people who are actually doing it with me right now on camera, if you see, I'm keeping my hand straight. Now, what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to internally rotate my shoulder a bit. Okay? I've said this in planes of motion when I've taught. Internal rotation of the humerus, external rotation of the humerus. Correct? Ball and socket joint. It can go anywhere. So internal rotation, this is external rotation. What I'm going to try to do, raise my hand up, slightly internally rotate. Now slowly try to bring my hand here, and even try to cross it. If you do it here, you're going to feel like a nice bulge over here. You'll feel like tightness in the muscle over here. So once you do this, like I know it hurts me right now because there's a lot of strong contraction happening. Hold this for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. You'll feel like this tightness in that particular area, in the clavicular region. Okay, done. Again, take your other hand up, slightly internally rotate. Okay, external rotation, internal rotation. We are going to internally rotate slightly. Then keep my arm straight. Let the muscle come close. See, you'll feel like a bulge happening here. Slight bulge. Push. Now what is happening? Insertion point is extremely close to the origin point. So the muscle is completely under contraction. How many of you all feel the tightness when you all are doing it? Okay, nice. Benisha raised her hand up. Nice, okay. So you understand the point, right? So insertion coming close to the origin. When you feel a little bit of tightness, just hold on to this position for 10 seconds. Your activation is done. Activation should be done for about 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. So general warm up 5 to 6 minutes. Foam rolling maximum about 3 to 4 minutes because you're only going to focus on the exercise, the muscles that you're going to be using in today's workout. Then come to activation. So if you put everything together in 15 minutes, you should be ready for the workout. Okay. Then once we are getting ready for the workout, main workout, we are going to start with warm-up sets. Okay. Warm-up set, then we go to prep sets. Okay. Warm-up set is just the basically namesake, you know. Like say for example, if I like to lift 40-50 kgs on my bench press, it's not possible for me to directly jump on 30, right? Mentally, I need to be confident and prepared. So I'm going to start with a 15 kg dumbbell. Namesake, just try to get comfortable with the weight. That is my warm-up. Then I'm going to start my prep sets, which can be after 15, I'll jump to 25 and I'll do 30 kgs. Done. Now my main set starts. So I'll start my counting from here. Then I'll do 3 main sets of 40 kgs. My workout is done for that particular exercise. How do we start the setup, okay, with the dumbbells? So I'm going to show the first set with the lightweight, how you're going to set up, okay. For most of the common population, we never advise, if you see in your powerlifting techniques and all, people raise their hip, okay, to basically generate more force using the legs and everything. And also sometimes that also works in their favor because they end up cutting the range of motion. So it improves how much weight they can lift. For general population, we don't try to say so many things. We tell them the 5-point contact position. What do I mean by the 5-point contact? Which means when I'm doing the chest press, 1, 2, left leg, right leg, 2 contact points, hip, 4, okay, and then my shoulder and my head, 5 contact. Okay, so you can see, I told you about the 5-point contact system. So head, shoulder, hip, right leg, left leg on the floor. So this is exactly how I'm going to sit, okay, on the bench. Now when I'm doing the movement also on the bench, I need to always remember that when I'm performing the movement and when my hand is coming down, first of all, the hand should mimic like a pillar for the weight. Okay? Always remember, your forearms are like the pillar for the weight. So when the weight is coming down, your hand should be straight, your forearm angle, okay? And you should be ideally going to at least the point where your upper arm is parallel to the floor. At least that much range is important. Your upper arm should be parallel to the floor. Forearm should be like a pillar, it should be straight. So if these are my hands, okay, this I'm starting the movement from here, it is going here, here, here. Now if you see here, my forearm is straight, so it's mimicking a pillar point. My upper arm is parallel to the floor. This is the point to where I'm holding to. Okay. Now there is something called active range and passive range.
Okay. Cool. So I was talking about the active and passive range. So basically, if you see, if someone tells me to try and mimic a bench press while I'm sitting like this without any weight in my hand, I think this is exactly how much I'm going to go. Okay. So this is my ideal bench press range if someone tries to tell me to show it. Okay.
So this is my active range. Okay. But when I'm taking the weight, because the weight is so heavy, I can push this much. Correct? I guess some of you must have done it on the gym, you all must have experienced this thing. If I'm trying to show someone my bench press, this is my position, this is my angle. But if there is a heavy weight in my hand, I actually end up going this much. So this is actually my passive range. Because I am not actively doing it, the weight is pushing me. If you want to take care of your joints, then always stick to active range. So if your mobility naturally allows you to go behind this much, then go for it. But if your mobility only allows you this much, then stick to this point. Don't let the weight unnecessarily push you down forward because that is going to be detrimental to the joint's health. Okay? So active range and passive range. All of us have a different active and passive range. My mobility is bad when it comes to my shoulder. Okay? So I always try to stick to this much when it comes to range. Okay? I'm telling you right now because when I perform it, you might think, why am I not touching the dumbbell on my chest? Sometimes we have that question that I could do this way, or my friend does it that way, or my other coach told me. So there is absolutely no issue with the depth. Ideally, if you're doing it with the bench press also, the bar should touch the chest and go back because then you're trying to at least activate the muscle to its maximum potential. But it is also subjective to each one's mobility. How much does your individual mobility allow you to go? Okay, so if I had the dumbbells here, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, so first I take one dumbbell on the left leg, other dumbbell on the right leg. Okay, so this is how I'm going to prepare myself. So once I'm seated here, then what do? I use a nice tight grip on the dumbbell. Slowly lie down, kick the dumbbells with my legs, push it up, set myself. Okay, now once I've set myself with the dumbbells are nice and straight in line. While it's coming down, the forearms are acting straight like a pillar. I go till my active range and push. Now if I had to show you my passive range, I could actually go down here. Are you able to see the difference in the active and passive range? Now this I can go right now, but I will not be able to tolerate every time because it can hurt my shoulder. So I will try to see how much of active range allowing me. That's it, I will go. If I had to force myself for more range of motion, I can go here, but this is not very great because that range is not something that I can actively do. That is basically the weight is pushing me down all the way. Unnecessary strain on the shoulder. So that is what it is.
Okay, Rabia, shouldn't the head be rested on the bench?
One simple thing. Whether the head should be rested on the bench or not is not the argument. Is the client's head into the neutral position? That should be the argument. Your job when the client is performing the exercise is that basically you have to ensure that the neck remains in neutral position. What do we mean by neutral position? Is basically when I'm sitting like this. Now if you see, my head is in line with my shoulders. Here my head is not in line with the shoulders. Here my head is in line with the shoulders. Your job is to get this position when the person is performing the bench press. Now if you see a deviation in that particular position, give a pillow to the client or give an extra napkin, make a double or triple fold in the napkin, make it nice and thick, give the napkin underneath the head. Because argument is again not whether the head has to be rested or not. The argument is that the head has to be in the neutral position. So do whatever you can to get the head in the neutral position, that's all. So always remember the basics, they never change. I don't even know right now whether my head was touching or not, because everything is so well programmed in my head. I don't really think about anything. I'm just thinking about the task. I need to perform 10 reps. I take the weight, lie down, do the 10 reps. Everything else is like auto programming. Now I don't even know what did I do right now. I don't remember also. So when you're constantly practicing, everything becomes an auto program. You just have to think of the task and the body gets set to ready to perform it. Okay? Now,
Tina, I'll just look at your question, okay? The elbow should be pointing in slightly inward as in the near. Okay, yes. So the elbow angle should be 45 degrees. Okay. Now, if this is the movement, okay, see. If this is what I'm performing the bench press,
this is not the right angle for the elbow. It should be 45 degrees. That means here. This can trouble the shoulder. It's always 45 degrees. Okay. So if you see, Vinisha, if you see right now, if you see my body here, this and this angle looks like 90, right, Vinisha? This looks like 90. So think about half. If this is like 90, this would be 45. So 45 degree angle. 45 degree angle is the most comfortable angle. But again, 45 is advised, but we cannot be so precise with everyone. We have to just see that it's not hurting. If it's hurting, you can drop the elbow angle a little bit. Because we don't really go to the gym with devices. So we can't, I also can't measure my client's exact angle, but I try to ensure that it's not hurting. That's it. So 45 degrees, what is advised? So not like this, slightly like this. 45 degrees.
pushes the dumbbells with the weights up. Okay. The weight is up in the air. Okay. This is his starting point. Okay.
As he's coming down, if you see, the forearms remain straight as much as possible, acting like pillars. Upper arm parallel to the floor or even slightly below. Now if you see, there is a difference between the active range of me and Sagar. Okay. So I have a relatively poor active range. He can go further deep down because he has better shoulder mobility. Okay. That's it. Cover. Okay. Sure. Let's do 5 reps. Okay. So he's going for full contraction, up. Full contraction at the bottom and up. 3, 4, and 5. That's 5.
You pick up the dumbbell, gently go on the floor, lie down.
Again, 5 contact position, 5-point contact. Head, shoulder, butt, both the legs. Okay. All remain in strong contact with the support system, the surface below you. Okay. Weight comes down. Okay. Shoulder retraction. Again, just enough for keeping the joint stable position. That is done. Then upper arm. Again, at least parallel to the floor to get you to a good resistance level. Forearms acting like pillar. Okay. When it comes to gripping, when you are using dumbbells, you have no choice but to always take full thumb grip. Okay. You're always going to hold it like this. When it comes to barbell, sometimes we go on false thumb grip, sometimes we go to full thumb grip. So it depends on the barbell. Sometimes we can change. Okay. Dumbbells gets very risky, so we always prefer a full thumb grip. Okay.
Sagar, floor press करेंगे 5 reps. I don't know. So Tanya, we are just demonstrating the floor press. Okay. Get this concept clear. Okay. That is why floor press is not the best option if you're training at home. I mean, something is better than nothing, but not the most efficient. Okay. Because if you see, when Sagar is trying to do the repetitions, let's go 5. If you see,
everybody saw Sagar's range of motion when he was on the bench. Okay. Now when he tries to go down, if you see, the dumbbell is not even touching his chest. When he was performing on the bench, the dumbbell was actually touching the chest and in fact going a little more lower. But here, if you see, it's not even touching the chest. It's barely like probably about at least 3.5 inches away from the chest. So the range of motion is reduced. Up. Okay. So if you see, he's going to perform another 4 reps, but all with limited range of motion. The range of motion has dropped, in fact, because 3.5 inches away from the chest. So because the range of motion has reduced, the activation of muscle is also not going to be very impressive.
okay.
So is there any way that we can increase the range of motion when doing, the floor press, like putting something under our back or something like that?
Yeah, you can put something under your back. Something, if you have a hard cushion at home, you can use hard cushions to basically control that particular part. That can work. But see, ideally, like I said in the induction session yesterday, you can use whatever you want as far as you are in a stable position. If you keep shaking, then you're going to be
Mhm.
more worried about falling and protecting yourself than focusing on the muscle activation. Because
Okay.
if there is a choice between muscle activation and protecting yourself from falling, your body will always choose to put focus there. You're always going to be worried about not falling and holding yourself from the injury. So your mind is always going to be diverted there. Muscle activation drops. So for muscle activation to happen well, you always have to be in a good stable position. Even when we are doing unsupported movements, if I am doing a bent over rows also, but if I am shaking like this, my feet are shaking.
People keep moving their toes up and down. If that is going to happen, your muscle activation is gone. If you're doing bent over rows also, I need to be nice and strong and hard. I need to be able to hold this position comfortably for 15 seconds and talk to you. That means I'm very stable here. Then I can focus on muscle activation. But if I'm going to keep shaking here and there, my feet are wobbling, butt is moving aage piche, that means the muscle activation drops. So that is how it is. What is the correct landing position? Mid chest or lower than that. Okay. So Kalyan, when you're doing flat bench press, basically the landing position is like the nipple area. Okay. We have the male nipple area. Okay. That is your landing position for the flat chest press. Okay. When we are doing incline chest press, the landing will change. It will be more towards the clavicle side. Okay. Near the clavicle bone. Okay. When you're doing decline chest press, then you're focusing more towards the below the nipple area. Okay. So somewhere here where the sternum bone ends, it's on this area. So your landing position changes. Mid chest, okay, like for flat bench press, incline bench press, decline bench press. All you're doing is basically trying to get your weight in line with the direction of the muscle. Okay. The reason why we do here in the flat bench press, because you're in the center point, right? So you're trying to reach maximum activation of all the muscle fibers. Clavicular fibers, sternocostal fibers, we are trying to achieve maximum. So the landing is here. When you are doing incline, the landing changes because you're focusing more towards the clavicular fibers. Your positioning is changing. So your hand position also needs to match the line of the muscle, the direction of the muscle fibers. So your landing also changes. Here the landing is different. When you're lying down and decline, your hand goes a little like this. Your hand drops behind because the angle has changed. Again, you're trying to match the direction of the muscle fibers. So your hand changes and you're basically landing slightly here because your elbow is shifting up. So everywhere you're basically just trying to match the direction of the muscle fibers. That is what it is.
Vaishali, what about the back arch?
Back arch, Vaishali, you're just keeping it normal the way your neutral arch position. Okay. So if I'm sitting on the bench here, okay. If you see right now, I'm in my neutral position, right? I'm not doing anything to my arch. I'm maintaining the natural arch that God has given me. Okay. If this is the position, I will go here and tighten myself here, and that's it. So it's my neutral arch position. If you give a slight high arch, okay, which means I'm trying to lift myself slightly high, which you all can see here. Okay. This has no harm. There's no harm to give a high arch because if it's keeping you in a comfortable spot, go for it. Okay. There is no harm to it because in yoga also many people do the stretches for hyperextension and everything. So your spine can very well handle this kind of arch also. It's just whether are you comfortable in it. Most of the general population clients don't have the flexibility and the mobility to do these things. It can bring discomfort to them. If you can do it, fantastic. I don't mind doing it because I can drag my legs behind, keep a nice tight arch here, and I can go for the pressing here. So for me, it's not an issue because I'm pretty comfortable with that. But again, doing it high arch is no harm. Okay. Should be very subjective if your client is comfortable. If the client is comfortable, there is no pain, he's not complaining of anything, go for it, no harm.
If your feet do not touch the floor, can you do the set with your feet on the bench?
Karen, good question. But the thing is that you can do it with the feet on the bench. It may not be the most comfortable position. Okay, because what happens is that the reason we need to, the reason why we call the 5-point contact position so important, it's because the legs provide us with additional stability. Now, what happens is that if the legs are spread out on the floor, the pillar is wrong. So the pillar is going to give you good support. Putting it on the bench reduces the size of the pillar. So the stability can get challenged. Is it wrong? No. But is it going to give you additional stability? No. If you're doing it with 5 kgs, is it right or wrong? Absolutely, you can go for it. If you're doing it with 20 kgs also, you can still do it, but you will need support from the ground. You will be more comfortable when your legs are on the ground if you're going for a heavier weight. On a lighter weight, it doesn't really matter. Some people even do it legs in the air in the gym. That is basically not the most efficient way of doing it, because you need to decide, are you focusing on strengthening of the core or you're trying to strengthening of the pectoral? Strengthening of the core, go for it. 5 kg dumbbell press with the legs in the air because you're focusing on strengthening of the core, go for it, because the focus is not here, the focus is strengthening of the core, so do it. But if you're trying to improve your pushing strength with the legs in the air, then it will be like not a very great additional input, because what will happen is that you're creating extra challenge for stability, because I'll be dangling in the air, right? I'm trying to hold my legs into the air in the position. So I'll be dangling halfway in the air, plus the stability here will weaken, that will drop my poundages. I'll not be able to improve my strength. So everything is okay to be done. As far as we know, the logic is clear. We know the reason why we are doing it. One of the reasons I would do an arch if I was in a powerlifting competition, because then I will be able to score faster with a lesser range of motion. The arch reduces your range of motion, right? If you see on YouTube and all these international elite level weightlifters, powerlifters, they have a very high arch, almost as 1 foot. 1 foot high arch. What happens is that the range of motion reduces, right? So they can score a heavier weight with a lesser range of motion. So that becomes a brownie point in a competition, right? You will win the prize. If you see sometimes, even the grip elite powerlifters, when they are holding the bar in a competition, they hold it very wide. Because wide grip means range of motion is less. No, it's only this much. If I'm holding here, that means look at the range of motion. If I'm holding here, look at my range of motion. It reduces, right? But what is the judge seeing? How much weight are you lifting? If what you're doing is within the limitations and within the guidelines of the Powerlifting Association, then it's okay. Go for a wide grip, because there we are not looking at functional efficiency. We are looking at performance. We are trying to see who lifts the maximum weight, he takes home the money. He takes home the prize. So it is okay to be done there, because there the focus is performance. It's basically the reward, the prize, money. That is the focus over there. Here we are talking about functional efficiency to strengthen ourselves or our clients. Objective is different. So high arch, again, if you feel more stable with an high arch, go for it. There's no harm at it. I don't feel very comfortable unnecessarily stressing myself, because anyways I have a tight back. Because of sitting job, I have a tight back. For me, creating an excessive arch is very difficult, because I don't have that kind of basically flexibility in my spine. It's very rigid, right? Because I have tightness in this area. So if I have to create a very high arch, it's basically uncomfortable for me. I can do a moderate level arch. High arch is very difficult for me. I don't do it. But it doesn't really matter to me, because as much as I want to lift, I can still do it, because I have good strength in my chest and shoulders. So it doesn't, like, for me as a person, it doesn't really matter. That's what I said. For your clients and for yourself also, you have to see where you're most stable. That's it. If a high arch is going to give you stability, do it. If a less arch is going to give you stability, do that. Because any which ways, the height of the arch is not going to decide whether it's a good lift or a bad lift. That is not the criteria. I would always prefer the dumbbells for the general population, because of the isolateral advantage I had explained in the induction also. Because your right and left hand both get to work equally. In a barbell, there can be slight imbalance that can occur. So if you want to improve the imbalance, dumbbells are better for the general public. Start with dumbbells, then move to barbells, and not the other way around. So yes, barbell has an advantage, because the stronger hand can take care of the weaker hand, but you don't want the strong to always take care of the weak, right? You want both of them to get strong. So if you want to get strong on both the sides, dumbbell will always be a better, basically, I would say it will always be a better way to do things. And then later on, if you want to still compete in powerlifting, or you want to just do bench press for the fun of it, you enjoy doing the bench press, like some guys, they just enjoy doing it, do it, there's no harm. But to start with, I would always advise start with the dumbbell. Because dumbbells, the other thing is that you also have to stabilize a lot, right? Because you have to coordinate between the right and the left. Your stabilization muscles also get active. There is a lot of stability work required with the dumbbells. So if you want better work for the stabilizing muscles, like your rotator cuff muscles will work much better with the dumbbell, because there is a stabilization that is required in both the hands. You want the stabilizer muscles to work more, go for the dumbbells. You don't want to work the stabilizing muscles, just want to focus purely on the pectoral, go for a machine. That's the best then. So it depends. Everything is good. dumbbell press and bench press in one session. Sorry, who's asking the question? Sanubhar. So Sanubhar, ideally there wouldn't be a need to do both in the same session. Ideally, you should either train with dumbbells for some time or train with barbells for some time, because if you keep changing constantly, adaptation will not happen. Because one is a bilateral movement, one is an isolateral advantage in the movement. So ideally, if you want to do, stick to one, or let's say probably about 3 to 4 months, then change. If you want to change, just for sake of it, you want to change, go for again 3-4 months on another thing. But give some time for adaptation to occur with the dumbbells or with the barbells. So only then you will be able to become better at it. If you constantly keep changing, you will not be able to excel in any of them. So that is my advice how I would look at it. But because I have seen certain people doing both the things in the same session, but there is no sense, right? Because you're mimicking the same movement pattern just by using bilateral and isolateral. I mean, it's just the way you do it is different, but the movement pattern still remains the same. So what's the point? You rather take a different exercise after that. Why waste energy on the same movement pattern? The setup remains the same. Sagar uses his legs to push the dumbbell up higher in the air. Now again, if you see the landing point, which Kalyan has asked, okay, it's not at the mid chest. If you see, you always see that landing point from the shaft of the dumbbell. Okay, the shaft of the dumbbell is the central pipe. Okay, always try to understand this landing point from that perspective, not the entire plate, because the plate is very big. So if you look at the plate, you'll be like, no, coach is still landing at the same point. Don't look at the plate, look at the shaft. So the shaft is here. It's in line with the clavicle fibers. So if I see here, you see here it's landing, because that is exactly where it's landing. I will just hold it for a second at the bottom. Okay. So see, here is the shaft. Okay, where my hand is, and my hand is exactly above his clavicle bone. So that is exactly where it's landing, his hand. Okay, that's it. Okay. So that was the landing point perspective. Okay. Other things still remain common. Your forearm still acts as the pillar, always remains straight. Upper arm at least parallel to the floor. Okay, that is actually considered as a good range. Okay, again, but very subjective to each one's mobility. But I'm sure everyone will have this much mobility where the upper arm can at least come to the parallel to the floor. Okay, those are the points. Again, when you're trying to focus on the setup and the tightness, again, everything remains the same. So your 5-point contact system. 1, 2, both the legs are done. Hip, shoulder, hand. Okay, 5-point contact position. Again, hands are here, remain straight, push it up. Now one more thing which I remembered is that people sometimes join the dumbbells. Okay, joining the dumbbells is no point, because ideally what you're trying to do is basically trying to just extend your arms, push movement, right? You're just trying to push. So if you push the arms straight up, job is done. There is nothing extra that's going to happen by joining the dumbbells. If you join this hand up, that should be good enough. Okay, my hands are here, thumbs down all the way. Okay, upper arm is parallel to the floor. Forearms acting as a pillar, straight and up. Again 1 and 2. Again 1 and 2. Okay. So if you see, the landing point is here, near the clavicle bone. That is what it is. So always try to remember, if you remember your anatomy lectures and you remember the skeletal muscle image that I have always been showing, you have your muscle fibers. Always try to match the direction of the muscle fibers, nothing else. And exercise is just that. Decline, incline, whatever we are doing, it's basically just matching the line of the muscle fibers. I had also made a point yesterday about the rib cage size, if you'll remember. So basically what happens is that if you look at the skeletal muscle drawings, okay, which are there in your presentations and on Google also if you see, then what actually happens is that most of the muscle fibers in the pectoralis major, okay, pectoralis major, your chest muscle, maximum fibers are in the sternocostal region, which means maximum fibers are connected to the sternum bone, okay. So sternum, costal ridges, and the fibers are connected to the costal ridges, so we call them sternocostal fibers, okay. Almost 70% of your pectoralis major is originating from the sternum bone. So sternocostal ridges, they are originating from the central portion, the sternum, almost 70%. 30% of the fibers in the pectoralis major muscle are coming from the clavicle. So sternocostal fibers, clavicular fibers. Both of them are part of what? Pectoralis major. Okay. So now if the direction is like this, okay, if you see my hand right now, okay, my hand is placed like this. If you see, here my hand is placed like this because this is clavicular fiber. I will change my hand. Now this is the direction of the sternocostal fibers. The insertion is somewhere here. Okay. This is exactly where the insertion point is, where I'm showing on with my finger. So what you're trying to do is that you are trying to match this line with the line over here. If this is the line of the fibers, it is inserting here. Okay. So this is better targeted in decline. Okay. Now what happens is that someone who has a big chest, okay, unfortunately not me, okay, but someone who has a very big chest, okay, big rib cage. Big rib cage means big chest size, okay. For them, if they just do flat, it's good enough. If they just do incline plus flat, good enough. Someone who has a very small rib cage, okay, people who have a very small rib cage. Small rib cage means the muscle will also be small over there, okay. For them, it better makes sense that they directly start targeting the decline bench because 70% of the fibers are in this particular direction, sternocostal region. So if someone has a small rib cage, and if you see some people have a very small structure, they'll be like this, small rib cage. For them, if I have to say which variation will be the best, I'll say just stick to decline. For variation, I'll say stick to decline plus flat. But if they have to just do one, then I'll say stick to decline. Again, variation, decline plus flat plus decline. If someone has the time and wants to have excellent development in the entire region, then I'll say go for the decline, go for flat, then go for incline as well. Okay. So that is the basically small point about rib cage size, which I had mentioned yesterday in the introduction. So now you'll understand. So basically, if your client is small, having a small rib cage, doesn't have any size, wants to add more size, then I would say go for decline bench. Okay. Or go for flat bench. Incline bench, only 30% clavicular fibers. Okay. It's a good variation, but should be given to people who are more at an intermediate level. First, focus on the development through flat bench and decline bench.
What about SMR of pectoral while doing warm up?
Navjeet, you can basically take a tennis ball. Okay. I don't have a tennis ball, unfortunately, today with me. You can hold a tennis ball. The general tightness occurs in this particular region. Okay. Hold a tennis ball. Stick yourself to the wall and you can push your body weight against the wall and try to foam roll that particular area. Tennis ball is good. There are also something called massage balls. Okay, these are little foam balls only, made out of foam, but basically little softer than the tennis balls. Okay, so it will not hurt so much. But for most of the male clients, I would say advise go with a soft tennis ball. That is better for them because the massage balls are not very great. You will not feel any pressure. So tennis balls, a soft tennis ball will always be better. You can nicely put the tennis ball between you and the wall and then try to use your body weight to massage it. That's it.
So is there an ideal angle for bench setup in incline and decline press?
Good point, Avya. So basically what happens is that generally, see, the main purpose of the angles is basically just trying to match line of the muscle, right? Your muscle fibers are moving in a particular direction. You are just trying to basically get yourself into an angle where it matches the best, okay? It can match the best potential for the muscle fiber direction. Now, when we are trying to go for the flat, there is no rocket science. This will be the flat angle. Okay, everybody knows that. That's why it's called the flat bench. So it's flat, completely horizontal to the floor beneath you. Okay. Now, when you are going for a decline angle, it is seen that minus 30 is a good angle. Okay, minus 30. If this is flat, minus 30 angle from here, I will have to show it on a different bench because this bench does not go to decline. Okay, like a standard bench with for only incline and flat. But I will show the incline angle. So incline angle can be this. This is plus probably 15. This will probably be 30. Okay, this will probably be something like 25. And this completely will be 90. So you understand the angles? Standing straight, 90 degrees. This will be somewhere about half. So roughly 40, 45. Okay. 30, 15 and 0. Now for incline, I would always advise that stick to between 15 probably 15 to 25. It depends how little high, but 15 is a good level for incline. 15 to 30. Some people take it on a low incline. They feel activation better because of the size of their rib cage. Some people go up to 30 also. Okay, so if I had to do it, I would go for 30 degrees. 30. This is the level that I would go for incline, but depends. In the past, when I had a little shoulder injury, it used to pinch me a lot. If I used to raise the angle too much, then I used to stick to 50. This is still a little incline, right? This is not completely flat. So some people are comfortable with low incline, some people are comfortable with high incline. But you wouldn't go more than that, okay? Because going more than this, going to this angle is no point. Why it is no point? Because as you keep increasing the angle, you are going outside the line of the pectoral muscle fiber activation. Now you are focusing more on anterior deltoid, so it becomes more like shoulder press. If I sit here, now this is less of chest, becomes more of a shoulder exercise. That is why what happens is that as we keep increasing the angle, we are going more towards a shoulder exercise than a chest exercise. Aditi, is that clear? Okay. सागर, तुमने ग्लूट्स क्यों रेस्ट नहीं किया था बेंच पे परफॉर्म करते टाइम?
more of a power lifter. इसीलिए.
Okay. Correct. So Sagar is more comfortable doing it that way because he feels a lot more stable generating force from that angle. Correct, Raj?
Exactly.
Aaja na idhar. Okay. So he's here only. So like I said, so Sagar and we are friends. We work in the same gym. I mean, we work out in the same gym. But basically, he has a different style of working out. I have a different style of working out. When he raises his glutes, okay, when he's creating a high arch, he feels more comfortable generating force from that position. For me, I can generate the same force even while after keeping my glutes on the bench. So it's not like which is better. It's probably for clients, I would say which one is more optimal. Where do they feel more comfortable? Okay? Because ideally, if you see for general population clients, we always advise the 5-point contact position because we want them to be very, very nice and strong and stable. Okay. Some people, because they like doing powerlifting, now Sagar is a professional boxer also. So he likes training in a certain way. So he feels that he can use his legs a lot more when the hip is high in the air. Correct? Yeah. So that is his reason of doing it. I look at more from a stable point of view. Where are you more stable? He feels more stable in that position. So he raises his glutes. He keeps a very high arch. I feel very stable by keeping my glutes on the bench. For me, I don't feel the need to raise my glutes so much because like I said earlier also, I have a tight back. For me, forming such a tight arch, okay, giving such a big curvature at my lower back, I find it very uncomfortable for myself. And I'm very comfortable generating enough force by even after keeping my glutes on the bench because it is not about how high you go. Your activation for the glutes starts from the legs. You can drive that force. I am also using my glutes.
But just because I keep it on the bench, people feel I'm not using my glutes. But I am activating it. Your glutes don't necessarily have to travel up in the air just because you want to activate it.
You can very well activate your glutes by contraction even after they are kept on the bench. So it's just a matter of what you're more comfortable with. I wouldn't say Sagar is wrong and I wouldn't definitely say I am wrong. It's about what we are comfortable with doing. He's comfortable in one technique, he does that. I feel comfortable in one technique, I do that. But if you want to take the benefit of glute activation, you have to focus on contraction of the butt cheeks. So even right now, if I'm standing and if I had to perform a squat, I would contract my butt cheeks. Yeah, I would give a nice tight contraction, then tighten my glutes, and then get into a squat and up. Again contract, push the butt behind, sit, up. Again contract, leave, done. Because the contraction of the muscle, what it does, pulls the pelvic back into the stable position. Okay, so you have good stability in your pelvic region. That is the only benefit. I can still do that thing here also. If I had to do that, I will nicely sit here, push my knees out. The moment I push my knees out, my butt is getting contracted. Get into this position and then start lifting from here. Now look at my legs. If I am keeping my legs like this, now my butt is completely relaxed. Now this is not an efficient way of doing it. See, my legs are relaxed. Now see what I do. So this is contracted. In spite of the butt being touching the bench, my hip is completely contracted. The butt muscle, the adductors, my quads are completely activated. This is activation. This is relaxing. Okay? So it's not like rocket science. If you're comfortable, raise it. If you're not comfortable, you can contract your blood muscles and still keep the activation on, but in spite of touching the bench.
Should the arms be slightly externally rotated when we hold the dumbbell?
It will be internal rotation, Kalyan, not external rotation. If you want to avoid confusion, then you should first understand what is external and internal. Keep your arms straight, okay? If you keep your arms straight,
He's talking about the wrist.
Yes, I'm talking about everything here. Everything is connected here. So if I'm keeping my arm straight, if I turn my arm outside, which means behind, imagine if I draw eye over here. Imagine if I draw eyes over here on the arm. If the eyes are going behind, this is external rotation. External rotation of the humerus. Okay? Humerus bone, external rotation. If the eye comes in the front, this is internal rotation of the humerus. Similarly, the eye is still over here, external rotation, internal rotation. Don't look at this position. You have to look at the arm, the upper arm, humerus. Because where is your pectoralis major connecting? Insertion is on the humerus bone, not here. So always talk from this point of view. Okay, this is your reference point. So external rotation, internal rotation. Because the arm is turning out, arm is turning in. Now when you are doing this thing, Kalyan, okay, you need to understand where is the insertion of the pectoralis major. Insertion is over here, where I'm pointing my finger. This is exactly where the internal rotation needs to happen. Why? Because the insertion of the muscle is here. Now when I'm doing this, I'm turning the hand slightly inward. Okay, see, slightly inward, internal rotation, then doing the muscle movement. Because when I do slight internal rotation, then my insertion is exactly in line with the origin and I'm performing the move. So it's not external rotation, it's internal rotation that we need.
Joining the dumbbell won't help in training the mid region.
joining the dumbbells is not really required because you're basically focusing on the push movement, right?
So when I'm doing this, when I've achieved my complete extension of the elbow, muscle has achieved its contraction point. There is nothing that's going to happen by moving the dumbbell inward. See, I have stretched the muscle, insertion has gone far from the origin. Now the insertion is coming close to the origin. Once the complete elbow extension is achieved, okay? Once the complete elbow extension is achieved, that means the job is done. Now, if I just push it inside unnecessarily, nothing is going to happen, right? Because the elbow is completely extended. The muscle is already under complete contraction. So, purpose is solved.
Incline chest press, is it necessary that the sitting area of the bench should also be in inclined position?
Very good question. The reason I incline the seat also so that I don't slip down. So if you see, now whoever asked this question, just see this. So now I am at an inclined position, right? Now I am trying to sit here. Now if the weight is coming in my hand, I'm going to slip like this, right? See, I'll slip. If I want to avoid slipping, what do? Now even if the weight is pushing me down, I cannot slip any further, right? Because my butt is locked, because the seat is high. That's it. So I'm raising the seat height just to make sure that I don't slip down. That's all. If you don't slip down, basically if you don't keep the seat high, it's okay because anyways, you will have to activate your legs a lot more. You will have to do more work. It's good, it's nothing wrong. I keep it seat high just to make myself comfortable so that I don't slip. But there's no such hard, fast rule. People can do whatever they are comfortable with. I would suggest keep the seat a little high so that you don't slip. That's it. Okay? Are there couple of questions pertaining to the bench? This one only. Let's finish it, no? Let's finish it. "45-degree angle only for the flat bench." For the flat bench, when I'm doing for the incline, then what happens? It will be slightly more outside. Now what happens? See, now the elbows don't need to be inside, because now if it's inside, then it will not be able to match the line of the muscle fiber. Now your elbow needs to flare out a little because your body position has changed. Earlier your body was on a flat angle. Now your body is in a slight incline angle, so automatically your elbows come behind. because you're trying to match the line of gravity also at the same time. So you're not going to be in 45 degree. Now it's completely, your arms are nicely flared out because you need to match the direction of the muscle fiber. So it's this. In flat bench it was here because the angle was different. Now the angle has changed, right? Now I'm trying to keep myself straight in line with the line of gravity. Plus I have to match the direction of the muscle fiber, so my elbows open up a little more. Is it seen properly? So Vivek, don't worry about the elbow angle. Just try to match the direction of the muscle fiber. Everything will come in line automatically.
The elbow should
Huh?
be in 45-degree angle in the incline press too. That's, yeah.
45-degree angle only for the flat bench. For the flat bench, when I'm doing for the incline, then what happens? It will be slightly more outside. Now, what happens? See, now the elbows don't need to be inside, because now if it's inside, then it will not be able to match the line of the muscle fibers. Now your elbow needs to flare out a little because your body position has changed. Earlier, your body was on a flat angle. Now your body is in a slight incline angle. So automatically your elbows come behind because you're trying to match the line of gravity also at the same time. So you're not going to be in 45 degrees. Now it's completely, your arms are nicely flared out because you need to match the direction of the muscle fiber. So it's this. In flat bench, it was here because the angle was different. Now the angle has changed, right? Now I'm trying to keep myself straight in line with the line of gravity. Plus I have to match the direction of the muscle fiber. So my elbows open up a little more. Is it seen properly? Aditi?
Yes, yes. We can say it very well. Yeah.
So Vivek,
Okay.
don't worry about the elbow angle. Just try to match the direction of the muscle fiber. Everything will come in line automatically.
Okay. One question by Rachana: can stepper be used for dumbbell press for home workouts?
Yeah,
The step
excellent.
boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, step board can be used, but again, Lakshya, it depends on
The width of the stepper. Because if the stepper is too broad, it's going to restrict your elbows from going down. If the stepper is as broad as the bench, then it's excellent because the elbows will go on the side. It will allow you to complete the range of motion that is available at the joint. Okay. If the stepper is broad, it will block your arms. Like imagine if this bench was this thick, it's going to restrict my upper arms, right? It will not be able to go down. So it's going to restrict. But if the bench, if the width is as good as the bench, then the stepper is a good choice for me. In fact, one of my clients, Ayan in London, we use a step board for him because he has a step board on which I make him perform the flat bench, and plus I forgot the product name, but Reebok has a nice product which can also be done into an incline position. Reebok has one product. I'll share the names. So I made Ayan buy that bench. So basically, he can also perform an incline angle as well as incline and flat angle at home using that stepper. It's a different kind of a product that Reebok designed. So I'll share the reference. Supported those, yeah. Okay. So cool. Don't think about the elbow angle so much. Just try to match the direction of the muscle fiber. When you're doing incline, which fiber are you trying to work on? Clavicular fibers. Clavicular fibers come from where? The clavicle bone. Clavicle bone is here. So match the direction of the clavicle bone. Elbow will automatically come in position. The only difference between a pushing movement like this, what we did in outside, and what we are doing flat, flies over here, it's basically outside what we did is a compound movement. It's a multi-joint. And when we are doing it here, it becomes a single joint movement. Right? Benefit of single joint is what? Isolation work. Okay? Isolating means you're focusing, contracting only on that particular area. You're focusing all your importance, your attention on that particular area. So in flies, the only thing is that there is little to no movement at the elbow. Okay? Very little movement, or actually no movement at the elbow. Your complete movement is happening at the shoulder joint. Okay? That is the advantage of doing isolation work. So you're purely focusing on this aspect. One more cue, okay, when I explain people how to do flies, is that I tell them, think about going and hugging your loved one. How do you give a hug to someone? Okay, this, right? So this is how you hug someone. Okay, your flies is nothing else but giving a big hug to someone. Okay, girls like to use a term called bear hug. Correct? So give me a bear hug. So this is what a bear hug is, right? Big hug. So basically, when you have your cables in your hands, think about giving a bear hug to someone. So how are you going? You're going to flare your arms and come like this. This, okay? Doing this is not a fly. Sometimes people start like this, then they go here, change the elbow angle, then they come like this. Have you seen this thing? People doing this, okay? So they are actually doing movement at the elbow joint. It's not an isolation exercise anymore. If you are doing this, isolation exercise means what? No movement at the elbow. That means once I set my arms in the right position, maybe I'm giving a slight bend at the elbow just for the safety. Okay, now I'm going to maintain this. Once I have this position, think about the bear hug. This and this. This and
Okay. So this is the same thing that we are going to be performing on a bench. Okay. Now we are using an incline bench to show the same concept. You can apply the same concept on a flat. You can apply the same concept on a incline, or even just sitting vertically and letting the cables come from behind. Correct? ये फ्लैट करे, इंक्लाइन करे या स्टैंडिंग करे वो पूरा जैसा नीचे करते हैं. तू नीचे करता है ना? हाँ, इधर करे. Oh, actually we'll perform the first flat one completely sitting upright so that it becomes easier for everyone to understand what we are trying to do. हाँ, ये रहता है ना नीचे angle. Now we are going to try and position the cables to line up with his chest muscles. Okay, so some people may be confused as to how high should the cable be. I'm basically just going to try and mimic his position with the chest muscle. Okay, Sagar, bed एक second. Okay, so now Sagar is seated on the bench. Okay, so if you see, where is his chest muscle coming? This. Okay, now he's sitting in an upright position, so it's more like flat bench. Okay.
this is nipple line. Okay. Now I'm going to try and basically take this position here. If you see my head is coming here. See. Okay. Correct. Okay. Let's see. Because now what happens is that if the cable goes high, it's not matching the line of the muscle fibers. Too low, again no match for the muscle fibers. I need to ensure that the cable is matching his muscle fibers. So maybe slightly will be the best thing for me. This is on 16. Okay. This is on 15. Okay. Yes. Match that easy. That's it. So what I did, I actually was not sure, so I asked him, match correct in the. So that is exactly how you should also ask a question to the client. There is no harm in asking, are you feeling comfortable or not? That is exactly how I would change the angle. Always asking my client, are you feeling comfortable? That is the first thing I look for. Stability and comfort. If the client is stable, is comfortable, go for it. Okay. Now, what is happening? Exactly the same thing. If you see there is a slight bend at this elbow, he is constantly maintaining that bend angle. Okay. Slight flexion is already there at the elbow. He's constantly maintaining that flexion and he's doing just like a bear hug. Okay, Sagar, head in the bench. Nice. Okay. Again, 5 contact position. 5 point contact is 1, 2, both the legs on the ground, feet, butt, shoulder, head. 5 points of contact. So all of them. Okay. And then using a full thumb grip on the cable, what is he doing? Slight angle at the elbow, which is flexion, maintaining that, and then basically again going for this active range of motion. So now what is happening? Insertion is here, if you all can see. Origin is somewhere here. Okay. Insertion, origin. Insertion is going away from the origin. Open your hand. Okay. Now hold. Okay. Now origin is your stable point, fixed point. Insertion is going away from the origin. Okay. So the muscle is getting stretched. Now when he tries to bring closer, insertion is coming closer to the origin point, the muscle is contracting. So shortening, lengthening, shortening, lengthening. Okay. That is the okay. 1, 2. Okay, Saga, head of the bench. Okay, this is exactly what the client also do. Sometimes they lift the head. Okay, so you remind the client, right, you use the head on the bench. So that when he keeps the head on the bench, his neck is in position. Okay. So That is what was for flies. Now the same thing can be repeated when you're doing incline. You can do flat. You can do completely like. If I had to do this, mimic this same angle on a flat bench, how would I do? I do basically what I do. Basically, try to pull this a little in the front. Okay, she goes down. Bench flattens up. Okay, this thing goes down. Okay, now once Sagar is going to land on the bench, I'm going to try and mimic and going to try to match the cable with the direction of the fiber. So once Sagar is here, okay, we try to see where is he coming down. Okay, now see, the cable is here. Okay, his chest is a little here. It's not a really fiber. Okay. I don't think this is the most comfortable position for him because the cables are going ahead, whereas the fibers are running perpendicular to me. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell the Sagar to keep the bench slightly behind. Okay. Now थोड़ा bench पीछे करते हैं, पता कैसे comfortable हो? और that's should be better. Okay. Now when I see the cables from the side, now it's more or less in line with the muscle fiber. Yes. Now it's much better. Okay. So now the cables are matching the direction of the fiber. So, how do you find this better? Rather comfortable. Okay. Now if you see the cable is the resistance, right? So the cable is coming from here where I'm standing. The muscle fiber is here. Okay. Just open hold. So see, muscle fiber direction, cable direction. Now if I take my hand, cut it down from here, from the cable to the fiber, you see all in one straight line. Earlier it was going slanted. So it was not the best position. This is the best position for him because you are matching the line of resistance to the line of pull. Line of pull is muscle. I have mentioned in other lectures that your muscle only knows one thing, to contract. So it means pulling each other. Okay? So line of pull matching the line of resistance. That's how you basically can improvise how the client is to set up. But just remember one thing, try to match the direction of the muscle fibers with the resistance and the job is done. Okay? I think last, we do 5 reps of this, and we do 5 reps. Yes, touches the bench every time. And just, Roshni, you always have to ensure that your feet are nicely, comfortably set on the floor. Because sometimes I've seen with female clients, if they are short in height, then what happens? Their legs don't reach the floor completely. Although they do the exercise, but I know from my experience that they are not very comfortable. So what I would do is that if I'm training a client who is short in height, I would actually take the plates. Okay, I would take these big plates in the gym. Okay, and I would put it underneath her feet. Okay, so that I'm giving her an elevation. And then when they keep their feet, they are a lot more stable. I have a client called Meghna who I train in the morning. So Meghna is probably about 5'4" in height, okay? 5'3" or 5'4". So sometimes when she's trying to do a bench press, her building gym where she does the exercise, her bench is a little more heighted. Okay? So the bench has a little more height compared to the one that I'm using right now. So what happens is that when she tries to go even for the flat bench press, her feet are touching the ground, but she doesn't feel as confident and as stable. Okay? So then what I tell Meghna that make her take about two plates of let's say 10 kg or 15 kg, keep it underneath the foot, that gives an elevation, and because of the elevation then she ties down and her confidence is a lot more because she feels a lot more stable. Here what happens, the legs are short. Okay, the person is short, the ground is there's a lot more distance between the ground and the legs. Legs are getting stretched a lot more, okay, and it just makes the client uncomfortable. So first look for stability and comfort, then start the execution. Yeah, as in when I'm sitting on the upright right position. Okay, I think this is what Madhu is asking, right? So when I did this, you are on the chest height, seat height, right? Okay. So Madhu, ideally, I would always say that try to set the seat at a height where the femur bone is parallel to the floor. My thigh bone should be parallel to the floor. This is the most comfortable position. Because if I was sitting like this, imagine if I were at this height. Okay, see, even to show this, I'm not very comfortable. Okay, so this is not very comfortable. But when I come a little more lower and my thighs, my femur bone is parallel to the floor, this I feel like very strong and confident. Okay, because I can feel good contraction by quadriceps, okay, good activation, so I feel more confident here. If it's too low, again it will be very uncomfortable. It's like this. This will be too low, this will be uncomfortable. If it's too high, again it's uncomfortable. So always try to keep the thigh parallel to the floor. That is the best seat height. And most of the times, if you see that the chairs that you use to eat food at the table, they will always be at 2.5 feet height because they are made in accordance with the general average height of Indians. Okay? So keeping in mind the average height of Indians, they keep the chair height about 2.5 feet from the ground. To the clavicle bone, where the clavicle fibers are coming from. What is actually 5? Okay. 1. Nice. And 2. 3. 4. And pause. Okay. Here again, repeating the same point. See, the cable is here, it's hanging. If you see the cable is nicely cutting it across to the clavicle bone, where the clavicular fibers are coming from. So it's absolutely in line where the muscle fibers are coming from. That's it. So setup remains the same, just like we discussed outside. Okay, I'm using a 30-degree angle, raise the seat height so that he's not stepping down. I will increase the seat height also. And the setup I will bring it with the cable. I'm trying to match the direction of the muscle fiber. That's it. Feet are comfortably grounded on the floor so that he feels not more stable and confident. He should not feel slipping. That's it. That is how the setup is. Now we are going to perform 10 repetitions of the standing cable. Exactly how he performed the first exercise while sitting, the sitting down flies in the complete upright position. He is exactly standing straight and remaining the same position. Okay. What is the difference between sitting and standing? Your core activation. So if you want to put more emphasis on the core activation, perform the exercise standing. If you want to reduce the core activation, purely focus on the pectorals, do it sitting. Because here the stabilization job is a lot more. Okay. He needs to stabilize his entire posture. So it's all his postural muscles. So his calf, hamstring, glutes, latissimus, trapezius, everything has to nicely stabilize his spine. So he can stand upright and he can continue to move. Okay. So this is the difference between sitting and standing. The other way of doing the flies, which I would also recommend, which is again very interesting, is in the bent over position. Okay. So bent over position. Correct? So again, bent over position also, again, unsupported movement. Core muscle activation is a lot more. Plus here what happens is that again, you can beautifully match the line of movement. Okay. So if you see what Sapan is trying to do, he's in a complete bent over position. They're talking to bent over position. And then he's trying to mimic what we do much, our flies on the position. Okay. Which is better? I would say these movements are better when you are doing it standing because of the high movement of the position. Okay. Seated, again, opposite, both are good. I would prefer better for the standing one because again you are involving more muscle groups by doing that. But seated again, if someone wants to purely focus on that, you already have a very strong core. You want to place more emphasis on the activation of the pectoral muscles. Then seated is again a better choice because you remove that extra work of the stabilization because of the core muscles.
So Anjali is asking like if you could repeat why chest fly is not given to G-pop, and also if dumbbell hex press is a variation for flies.
Okay, I'll cover the first part of the question first, which is why we don't give flies to the G-pop. Okay. Now what happens is that Anjali, with flies, okay, it's a single joint movement, right? Flies is a single joint movement, which means there is very little involvement at the elbow. The maximum emphasis is at the shoulder. Okay. Now imagine taking a 5 kg dumbbell and trying to do
This movement. Most of your beginner clients, your cheaper clients who are beginners also, they lack the adequate muscle control, right? They don't have control. Now imagine if they go here, they suddenly drop the dumbbells here. What is going to happen? They are going to cause an injury over here, like a rotator cuff tear or something. Because single joint movement, right? If the dumbbell loses control at this point, you're going to pop the shoulder joint out from the socket. Right? Your humerus ball is going to pop out because of lack of control at the shoulder joint. If the client has good control after 1 year of training, then this is a good movement for completely focusing on the pectoral muscle. But when they are starting out, you also know that clients lack that control. They don't have enough control. Because even when the client is doing bench press, the hands keep shaking while coming down the dumbbell. Correct? So because of that shaky form, do you want to risk the client's shoulder by giving them a fly? I don't think any coach would say yes. So which is a safer movement? Choose multi-joint movements. Risk is much lesser. In this, the injury risk is far lesser, or probably not even there if you're training with 2.55 kgs. But this can become risky because it's a single. So any mistake over here, and it could directly outstretch the shoulder, which could give you tendinitis, or it could basically cause an injury to the ligament. It could even damage the muscle if the muscles are very weak. Okay, so it's not that the exercise is bad. It's just that we are looking at safety profile of the client. We need to always see the safety profile of the exercise. Which exercise is the best from safety point of view for that particular client at that particular training status. And these are beginners who want to minimize the risk, right, as much as possible. You don't want it to unnecessarily get demotivated and stop coming to the gym. It has happened with many clients when you start working. One bad incident, they leave gymming for the next 10 years because they are so scared. Because they don't want to suddenly lie in bed and stop your work and personal life and everything, and then you don't try to recover from the injury. They don't want that. So that's why they stop exercising. So assessing the safety profile of the exercise is very, very important when you're working with a new client. 6 months, 1 year, training is good, experience is good, the understanding of form and technique is good. Then you can slowly introduce a flies if you want. That too only if the person is lacking. If the bottom you feel for some reason that the pectorals are not getting developed well enough, then add that. Otherwise, for general pushing strength improvement, focusing on flat press, incline bench press, these are better exercises. I'm actually a little confused. Just go slowly, repeat the question. Just tell me first half of the question. Repeat. Flies with legs. Okay. Okay. The elbow and the wrist are in same line, you said. Sorry. Correct. So while you're basically opening, it should be slightly internally rotated. Correct. What you just said is right. No, it has to be slightly internal rotated. वो गलत है. You need to have slightly internal rotation. That is the same thing which I was explaining now outside also. When I was showing, I think Khalyan had asked, so I was showing that if this is your insertion point and your height is here, slightly internally rotate and then do the flies. After the slight internal rotation, okay? This is internal, this is external. So slight internal rotation and then do the movement. So what happens with the internal rotation, Tina? It's not because I am saying it's right. You just have to understand the logic behind it. You need to internally rotate so that the insertion is in line with the origin. That's it. So it's not that I am saying it's right. It's because that's how the anatomy of the muscle is. You have to internally rotate a little bit so that the insertion is in line with the origin, and then when you're exercising, the insertion is coming close to the origin. If you don't internally rotate, what is going to happen? If I do this, the insertion is not matching the origin. When you come close, again the insertion is not matching the origin. So we have to do this to match it, and so that when you contract the muscle, it's happening in the right line. So the insertion is traveling towards the origin. So you have to set it up that way. If you are not going to set up, okay, you're not going to get injured, but it's not even efficient because the fiber is not traveling in the right direction. So good, now you're clear, I hope, right? Dumbbells would be good. Dumbbells would be good. Dumbbells would be good, Kalyan, but basically I would not recommend dumbbells because what happens is that the pathway that is forming because of the dumbbells, it's a curvy linear pathway. Okay? Curvy linear means not a straight line. You are experiencing full tension on the muscle when the resistance is in the line of gravity. But because of the curvy linear pathway, you are not experiencing complete tension on the muscle. But when I'm using cables, because of the pulley arrangement, the weight is always moving in the straight direction. So my muscle is always under constant tension. Whether I am here, 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 here. On the dumbbells, when you finish the flies, if you see, when you reach this point, you don't feel so much tension. You can nicely hold it here. Okay? Because now when you move, till here you don't feel any tension on the muscle. Only once you reach this portion, this much portion, that downward portion, you could say the second half of the movement, that is exactly when you start feeling tension with the dumbbells. Am I right? Anyone who's experienced this thing. Only when you are doing this, once you have reached this point and this point, that is when you feel maximum tension. You don't feel any tension on the top because it's a curvy linear pathway. So that is why cables become better. The cable arrangement is such it keeps you constant tension on the top. Yes, that is again one of the risky factors. That's why I would say cables are better. So basically again, active and passive contraction. I was saying the active range, passive range. I was saying the concept outside. You have to only extend till the point that you can control. That is active range. If you do extra, which is passive range, that can basically again put you under risk. So you have to only go up till where you feel maximum control of the weight. Don't look for efficiency as to what is going to give maximum muscle activation, because what if your shoulder joint is not mobile enough? You are not able to control that much. That will again put you under risk, right? So we need to only push until where we can control. We can hold control on the weight. We can bring the dumbbell safely back to its original position. If we unnecessarily try to extend too much, that will unnecessarily cause a stress on the shoulder joint. Your tendon can get extra stretch, again tendinitis. Could be if the person is very thin frame, carrying very little muscle mass, again it can pose an injury risk. Sometimes people even because they experience muscle tears because they don't have control, muscles are weak, they don't have adequate strength. Even the supporting stabilizing joint muscles, the shoulder and cuff muscles are not very strong. So any injury can happen. So first of all, I would never give single joint movements like isolation, flies. I would never give it to a client. None of
Yeah. So his question is, should we hold it for 1 to 2 seconds when we are at the contracted position? So yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying. Kalyan, tempo is one of the exercise variables. Okay. So basically you have many exercise variables. So like, for example, when you talk about resistance training, exercise selection is one of the variables, right? How can you vary an exercise program? So one of the things is exercise selection. Then volume, intensity, okay, frequency, 4 exercise variables. What else can be an exercise variable? Your rest interval. That can basically have different kind of adaptations on your physiology. Then what other than that? So I said exercise selection, volume, intensity, frequency, rest interval. And one of the last exercise variables that we talk about is tempo. Okay. Tempo means the speed of execution. Now, tempo can be used in many different ways. If you're using it with a beginner client to just ensure that there is stability in the movement, you can use tempo in a different way. If you are trying to focus on power development, the tempo can be different. If you're trying to focus on the endurance of the muscle, the tempo can be different. Because if you're trying to improve the endurance of the muscle, which means to improve its contractile ability under tension for a long period of time, then the tempo will be longer. Then I would say like a 3-second hold. But if you're trying to focus on the power development, you want to make basically there's a concept called reactive strength. Okay, you want to focus on how strong the reaction is, how quick the reaction is. Then even a 1-second hold is good enough. Okay, for an exercise like flies, we would only generally do it to basically improve the weakness of the pectoral muscles because it's a single joint movement. We don't use single joint movements for power development. So to put this question into perspective, I would say like a 2-second hold is good enough. More than that, the tension will be so high that it's going to affect the number of repetitions that you can perform. That answers, Kalyan?
Yes.
And
So
what is
the other
second part
question,
of that?
so the last question by Kalyan was, like about the breathing techniques. When should we breathe in and when should we breathe out?
So breathing technique is very simple, no? Because one of the most simplest techniques that I use with all the clients is basically exhale whenever you're going anti-gravity. Okay. So the line of gravity is this way. Whenever you're going anti-gravity, exhale. Inhale, we don't really have to remember. I tell all the clients that I don't have to teach you how to inhale, because if I hold your nose, you're going to push me, right? Because every human being wants to survive. So survival is our primary instinct. Nobody wants to die, right? Everybody will say, I'm frustrated with life, but you take them near the building and try to push them, they'll get very angry. Nobody wants to die. Okay. So we don't really have to teach anyone how to inhale. Just focus on exhaling, inhale will happen automatically. So whenever you're going anti-gravity, which means you're going away from the earth. So if the dumbbell is going up, like say for example, now if I'm pushing the dumbbell into overhead press, I'm going away from the earth. So this is anti-gravity, right? I'm going against the earth's gravity line. So exhale. Okay. Again, if I'm doing something on the flies over here, okay. Now what happens is that when I'm trying to do this movement in flies, if you see the weight stack is going away, right, from earth. The weight stack comes up. That means it's going anti-gravity. So exhale. Inhale, exhale. So you don't have to see this. You have to see what is happening to the resistance. So resistance is going away from earth. So that means it's going anti-gravity. So exhale. Again, what can be the other example? Lat pull down. When you're pulling the weight down, when you're pulling the handle down, what is happening to the weight? The weight is again shifting away from the gravity, right? Gravity is here. The weight is going up. So anti-gravity. So exhale. Again, because the weight is going away from the gravity. So how many examples did I give? Flies, lat pull down, squat. Again, squat also same thing. When you're sitting down, you're going towards the gravity. When you're going up, which means the concentric portion of the squat, you're going away from the gravity. So anytime you're going away from the gravity, exhale. Simple. Don't complicate the breathing too much.